Las Vegas has always been marketed as a symbol of excess, a place where money flows freely, risk is entertainment, and economic gravity feels suspended. For decades, the city thrived by turning consumer confidence into spectacle. When Americans felt good about their finances, Las Vegas expanded. When they didn't, it slowed. That relationship made the city more than a destination. It made it a signal. What is happening in Las Vegas today is not just a tourism story, it is an economic one. Beneath the headlines about mega projects, global events, and record-breaking attractions lies a growing imbalance between cost, value, and sustainability. Visitor numbers are slipping, prices are rising, public resources are increasingly tied to private returns, and the people who carry the city day to day are absorbing the strain first. This is not about one failed project or one bad season. It is about a development model built on constant growth, discretionary spending, and the assumption that consumers will always show up. As that assumption weakens, the cracks become visible. Las Vegas is not collapsing overnight. It is revealing something more uncomfortable: what a consumer-led economy looks like when it starts to stall. The question is no longer whether Las Vegas can attract attention. It always has. The question is whether the system supporting that attention can endure, and the answer may tell us far more about the future of American cities than about Las Vegas itself. Las Vegas is not an ordinary American city. It does not exist because people need to be there. It exists because people choose to be there. Unlike cities built around factories, ports, government institutions, or technology hubs, Las Vegas lives almost entirely on discretionary spending. Every dollar that flows into this city represents a decision someone made after paying rent, groceries, gas, insurance, and debt. Vegas only works when Americans feel financially comfortable enough to spend money they do not strictly need to spend. That is why Las Vegas functions as one of the most honest economic thermometers in the United States. When the American middle class feels optimistic, Vegas fills up. When households feel pressure, Vegas empties faster than almost any other major city. There is no essential demand here to hide the damage. No one is forced to gamble, watch a show, or book a resort room. When consumer confidence cracks, Vegas feels it immediately. In 2025, official tourism data showed an 11% drop in visitor traffic. On the surface, that number may not sound catastrophic. Many cities experience year-to-year declines. Weather shifts, airline prices fluctuate, trends change. But Vegas is different because its visitor base is not niche. It pulls from across income brackets, regions, and age groups. A decline of this size is not about preference. It is about capacity. People are not choosing other destinations. They are choosing not to spend at all. This drop is not driven by boredom with Las Vegas. It is driven by financial exhaustion. For years, American households absorbed rising costs without dramatically changing their behavior. Grocery prices climbed, rent increased, health insurance premiums rose, utility bills followed. Instead of cutting back immediately, many families relied on savings accumulated during the pandemic or leaned more heavily on credit cards. Discretionary spending survived longer than fundamentals suggested it should. Vegas benefited from that delay, until it didn't. By 2025, those buffers were largely gone. Pandemic-era savings had been depleted. Credit card balances reached historic highs. Delinquencies began rising, particularly among middle-income households. Wages increased nominally, but not fast enough to offset the cumulative rise in living expenses. What remained was a consumer class still employed, but financially stretched, cautious, and increasingly risk-averse. And when Americans become cautious, Vegas is the first expense to go. A trip to Las Vegas is not just a plane ticket. It is a hotel stay, resort fees, dining, entertainment, transportation, tipping, and constant incidental spending. The city does not offer low-commitment consumption. Visiting Vegas requires confidence that your finances can absorb thousands of dollars without long-term consequences. When that confidence disappears, so does the visitor. This is why the 11% drop matters. It is not a tourism story, it is a consumer behavior story. It reflects millions of households independently arriving at the same conclusion. Now is not the time to spend freely. That kind of synchronized restraint does not happen unless financial pressure is widespread. Las Vegas is revealing what national averages often obscure. Employment numbers may remain strong, GDP may still grow modestly, but discretionary behavior tells a different story. It shows what people actually feel about their financial future, and right now that feeling is caution. Vegas is not dying because people stopped loving it. It is slowing because Americans are running out of room to pretend everything is fine. When the city built on excess starts to contract, it signals that the consumer-led engine of the US economy is no longer accelerating. It is idling, and history shows that when Vegas idles, the rest of the economy usually follows. Over the last decade, Las Vegas did not respond to economic uncertainty by slowing down. It responded by building bigger stadiums, massive entertainment venues, Formula One infrastructure, luxury districts, and prestige projects became the city's answer to every challenge. Together, these developments represent roughly $20 billion in investment. On paper, it looks like growth. In reality, it reveals a deeper problem about who that growth is actually for. These projects were never designed with local residents in mind. They were built to attract investors, high-spending tourists, global events, and international attention. The goal was not to improve daily life in Las Vegas, but to elevate the city's brand, to signal relevance, to compete for prestige in a global entertainment economy. What gets lost in that process is the distinction between economic activity and economic benefit. Mega projects create headlines, not stability. They generate spikes in attention, not broad-based prosperity. A stadium fills on game days, but sits dormant most of the year. A Formula One race brings in a surge of high-income visitors for a single weekend, but leaves behind disruption, inflated prices, and infrastructure costs that locals continue to pay for long after the cameras are gone. The Sphere attracts spectacle, but not necessarily wages that can support a household. The financing structure behind these projects is where the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. While private companies and investors capture long-term revenue, much of the risk is socialized. Public subsidies, tax abatements, infrastructure spending, and municipal bonds shift the financial burden onto the city and its residents. In effect, everyday taxpayers help underwrite projects they neither use nor benefit from directly. This creates the illusion of growth without inclusion. Money flows into Las Vegas, but it does not circulate evenly. It concentrates. High-end tourism spending is narrow by design. It targets luxury suites, premium seating, exclusive experiences, and VIP access. That money bypasses much of the local economy. It does not lower housing costs. It does not stabilize healthcare expenses. It does not make utilities cheaper or wages meaningfully higher for the majority of workers. For local residents, the impact is often the opposite. Mega projects drive up land values, rents, and operating costs. Small businesses face higher leases. Service workers face longer commutes as housing becomes less affordable near job centers. Public resources are diverted toward maintaining prestige infrastructure rather than improving schools, transportation, or basic services. The city grows visually, but not functionally. This type of development assumes that if the city looks successful, success will eventually trickle down. But Las Vegas is showing the limits of that assumption. When visitor numbers decline, the fragility of prestige-driven growth becomes clear. These projects require constant inflows of spending to justify their cost. They are not resilient. They do not adapt well to downturns. When demand softens, they become liabilities rather than assets. What makes this particularly dangerous is timing. Many of these investments came as consumer spending was already under strain. Instead of strengthening the city's economic foundation, Las Vegas doubled down on a model that depends on peak consumer confidence. It bet on a future where Americans would always spend freely. That bet now looks increasingly misaligned with reality. The result is a city that appears more impressive on the surface, but more vulnerable underneath. Growth occurred, but it was narrowly targeted. It benefited investors, global brands, and high-end visitors, while exposing residents to higher costs and greater fiscal risk. When the economic cycle turns, those residents are the ones left absorbing the impact. Las Vegas did not fail to grow. It failed to grow in a way that could sustain itself. And as consumer spending tightens, the difference between headline growth and real economic health is becoming impossible to ignore. One of the least visible forces shaping modern American cities is public subsidy. It rarely appears in headlines. It is buried in financing structures, tax incentives, and long-term agreements that most residents never read. Las Vegas is no exception. In fact, it represents one of the clearest examples of how public money is quietly redirected to support private profit under the promise of economic growth. Major stadiums, large-scale events, and prestige developments in Las Vegas are often presented as private investments. The language used emphasizes job creation, tourism boosts, and future tax revenue. What is less emphasized is how much of the financial risk is absorbed by the public. Through hotel taxes, sales taxes, municipal bonds, infrastructure spending, and long-term tax abatements, local governments effectively subsidize projects whose profits are secured by private operators. For residents, this creates a distorted reality. Taxes are collected broadly, but benefits are distributed narrowly. The public pays upfront and over time, while private entities lock in revenue streams that remain protected regardless of broader economic conditions. Ticket sales, naming rights, sponsorships, broadcast deals, and premium experiences generate consistent income for operators, even when overall visitor numbers fluctuate. This is not unique to Las Vegas. Cities like Detroit, Atlanta, and Los Angeles have followed similar paths. Publicly financed stadiums and event infrastructure are justified with the same arguments: economic revitalization, global relevance, and long-term returns. Yet decades of data show that these projects rarely deliver proportional benefits to the communities funding them. What Las Vegas demonstrates is not a deviation from the national pattern, but its most concentrated form. The subsidy trap works because it reframes public spending as investment rather than transfer. Money that could have been used for schools, transportation, healthcare access, or housing stability is redirected toward maintaining assets that primarily serve visitors and corporations. Once committed, these subsidies are difficult to reverse. Contracts extend decades into the future. Debt obligations persist regardless of economic performance. For city budgets, this creates rigidity. During downturns, public services face cuts while subsidized projects remain protected. Residents experience reduced services, higher fees, and greater fiscal pressure, while private operators continue to operate under favorable terms negotiated during periods of optimism. The risk is asymmetric. Losses are socialized. Gains remain private. In Las Vegas, this imbalance is especially visible because of the city's narrow economic base. When visitor traffic declines, tax revenue tied to tourism falls, but subsidy obligations remain fixed. The city becomes financially squeezed from both sides. It collects less while owing more. Residents are left to absorb the difference through higher fees, reduced services, or deferred public investment. What makes the subsidy trap particularly dangerous is its invisibility. Most taxpayers do not connect rising local costs to long-term subsidy agreements. They experience the symptoms without seeing the cause: higher taxes, more fees, strained public services. These are often blamed on mismanagement or economic cycles rather than structural commitments made years earlier in the name of growth. Las Vegas exposes the core flaw in this model. Economic development that depends on public subsidy to guarantee private profit is not resilient. It assumes perpetual expansion and stable consumer demand. When that demand weakens, the system does not adjust. It transfers pressure downward onto residents who have the least capacity to absorb it. The city did not just invest in projects, it locked itself into obligations. And as consumer spending tightens, those obligations become harder to justify and harder to sustain. Las Vegas is not alone in this position, but it is among the first to reveal the consequences at scale. Resort fees also distort market signals. Instead of reflecting demand through transparent pricing, they mask it. Hotels can claim high occupancy while extracting more revenue per guest, even as overall visitor numbers decline. This creates a false sense of stability. Revenue may hold temporarily, but the underlying consumer base shrinks. For the city, this model carries risk. Resort fees do not contribute to public tax revenue in the same way traditional taxes do. They flow primarily to private operators, bypassing municipal budgets even as they compensate for costs generated by city-scale projects. The public infrastructure absorbs the strain, while the financial return remains private. What emerges is a system where visitors and residents indirectly fund development without representation. Costs rise quietly, accountability diminishes, and trust erodes. Over time, consumers respond not with outrage, but with absence. They simply stop coming. Las Vegas is now confronting the consequences of this approach. As families, middle-income travelers, and international visitors step back, the city becomes more dependent on fewer, higher-spending guests. That concentration increases vulnerability. When those high-end segments fluctuate, there is no broad base left to stabilize demand. Resort fees were never just a line item. They were a signal, a sign that the cost of growth had outpaced transparency, and as that cost continues to rise, the hidden tax becomes impossible to hide. Las Vegas is often portrayed as a city built for first impressions. Bright lights, spectacle, and excess dominate its image. But beneath that image lies a quieter truth. The city does not survive on first-time visitors. It survives on repeat ones. People who return year after year, sometimes multiple times a year, form the most stable and predictable foundation of Las Vegas's economy. Repeat visitors behave differently from first-timers. They do not come to see everything. They already know the strip, they understand the layout, the pricing, the rhythm of the city. Their spending is more consistent, their expectations clearer, and their loyalty far more valuable. They fill hotel rooms during off-peak periods, stabilize demand between major events, and sustain businesses that cannot rely on constant waves of new tourists. This stability is precisely what Las Vegas is now losing. When prices rise faster than perceived value, repeat visitors are the first to notice. They remember what a trip used to cost. They know which fees are new, which experiences have been reduced, and which perks quietly disappeared. Unlike first-timers, they have a benchmark, and when that benchmark is broken, trust erodes. In recent years, the cost of visiting Las Vegas has increased across nearly every category. Room rates fluctuate unpredictably. Resort fees have climbed. Dining prices have surged. Entertainment costs have escalated. What has not increased at the same pace is the quality of the experience. For repeat visitors, this imbalance is impossible to ignore. The danger lies in how silently this market disappears. Repeat visitors do not announce their departure. They simply stop booking. They postpone trips. They reduce frequency. They look for alternatives that offer clearer value. Individually, these decisions seem insignificant. Collectively, they hollow out the city's most reliable revenue stream. First-time visitors, by contrast, are volatile. They are influenced by trends, marketing, and spectacle. They come once, spend heavily, and often do not return. While they generate short-term revenue, they do not provide continuity. A city built primarily on first-timers must constantly outspend itself to attract attention, a strategy that becomes unsustainable as costs rise. Las Vegas historically balanced both markets. Repeat visitors provided stability. First-timers provided growth. What is happening now is a shift away from that balance. As value erodes, loyalty breaks first, and without loyalty, the entire tourism ecosystem becomes fragile. This loss has ripple effects beyond hotels and casinos. Airlines lose predictable demand. Restaurants lose regular customers. Service workers lose steady hours and tips. The city loses its ability to smooth out economic cycles. What remains is a sharper, more volatile system that reacts violently to changes in consumer confidence. The decline of repeat visitors is not a marketing failure, it is a structural warning. It signals that the cost of growth has outpaced the relationship between the city and the people who sustained it for decades. When a destination loses the trust of its most loyal customers, recovery becomes far more difficult. Las Vegas does not need more first-time visitors to survive. It needs to stop losing the ones who already knew it well. And right now, that loss is accelerating quietly, without headlines, but with long-term consequences that cannot be ignored. In recent years, Las Vegas has increasingly defined success through events. Formula One races, the Super Bowl, residency concerts, and global spectacles dominate headlines and promotional campaigns. These moments are presented as proof of economic strength, cultural relevance, and global appeal. But behind the attention lies a fragile reality. An economy built around events is not stable. It is intermittent, expensive, and structurally vulnerable. Event-driven growth does not produce continuous demand. It produces spikes. For a few days or weeks, spending surges, hotels fill, prices rise, revenue peaks, then the city resets, waiting for the next date on the calendar. Between those moments, demand softens, workers lose hours, and businesses struggle to maintain consistency. The rhythm becomes uneven, unpredictable, and increasingly difficult to manage. This volatility affects every layer of the local economy. For workers, especially in service and hospitality, income becomes irregular. Hours expand during major events and contract sharply afterward. Tips fluctuate, scheduling becomes unstable, financial planning becomes difficult. An economy that promises opportunity but delivers inconsistency leaves workers exposed to risk they did not create. For the city itself, reliance on events distorts financial planning. Infrastructure must be built and maintained to handle peak demand, even if that demand only exists briefly. Roads, security, public services, and transportation systems are scaled for extremes rather than everyday use. The cost of readiness remains constant, while the benefits arrive intermittently. Events are also expensive to attract. Hosting major spectacles requires concessions, subsidies, and long-term commitments. Cities compete aggressively, offering tax incentives and public resources to secure global attention. The return on these investments is often overstated, calculated using optimistic assumptions that ignore displacement, opportunity cost, and long-term wear on infrastructure. What makes this model particularly risky is its dependence on external conditions. Event economies are highly sensitive to economic downturns, travel disruptions, and shifts in consumer sentiment. When households tighten budgets, large-scale entertainment is among the first expenses to be cut. A city dependent on event-driven spending experiences sharper declines than one supported by steady, diversified demand. Las Vegas once used events to complement a broader tourism base. Today, events increasingly function as anchors. That shift concentrates risk. Instead of smoothing economic cycles, the city amplifies them. Peaks become higher, but troughs become deeper. Stability is sacrificed for spectacle. This dependency also narrows the city's strategic options. When performance is measured by attendance numbers and global attention, policy decisions prioritize visibility over resilience. Resources flow towards securing the next major event rather than strengthening everyday economic fundamentals. The city becomes reactive, chasing momentum instead of building durability. An economy tied to a calendar cannot sustain long-term security. It creates excitement without continuity and growth without balance. As Las Vegas leans further into this model, the warning signs become harder to ignore. Headline events may continue to arrive, but the space between them is where the real economy lives. And in that space, instability is becoming the norm.